Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Getting Hammered. I am your host, Mary Katharine Ham. I'm here with my co-host, Vic Mattis of the Washington Free Beacon, and this is the results episode. It is the day after Election Day, and we have results. And one of the results of election night and working is that I have had 1.5 hours of sleep. So please forgive any mistakes that I make. I believe Vic is in a little bit the same boat. How's it going, Vic?
Hello, Mary Catherine. I was going to say ditto. For us, it was a very late night, early morning at the Free Beacon. And the way we run things in our shop, of course, is we have all these pre-writes. So every possible hot race that's going on in the Senate and the House, various propositions, whatever it is, and of course, the big race, we have two different, scenarios. And we pre-write them during the day going into the night
Right.
of Tammy Baldwin winning, Tammy Baldwin losing, or Alyssa Slotkin, Mike Rogers. And you look that over so that when the Associated Press makes their announcement, we're not our writer, God forbid, would,
Right.
sit down at that moment and crank something out. No, we just have to input the percentage points and then, hit post and make sure that it's the right one. So that was going on all day and night yesterday. And then I think I got back home after 1 a.m. and then watched a little bit more. And then here I am now. I do have, I want to say, and my boss, Eliana Johnson, got this from me a couple years back as a gift. One of these fancy coffee mugs that continually heats your coffee.
Look at you.
Yes, it is.
Innovation.
It's called like Amber or something. Ember. It is Ember, Ember. So I'm using this right now as we tape Getting Hammered. And for our listeners, by the way, this is a morning show that is in fact taped this morning.
This morning.
So Mary Catherine, how about you? How are you? How are things there? What was it like?
I'm good. Actually, I'm going to crib from my friend Liz Wolfe on Twitter real quick, just to give everybody a real big overview to start off, and then I'll talk about the individual things. So she notes Trump declared winner around 5:30 a.m. He won Pennsylvania, Georgia, Wisconsin, Michigan, Arizona, Nevada. Results are TBD, but those might be determined by now. I think Ralston, who is the expert there and had predicted a 0.5 point or like half a point Harris win, conceded early this morning, this is going his way.
Wow.
So that's all the battleground states. He will win Alaska, but it's not in yet. Republicans took the Senate by picking up seats in West Virginia and Ohio. There will likely be more. I believe they just called Montana for Tim Sheehy, who's the Republican challenger
that was
against John Tester. Sherrod Brown, the Ohio senator incumbent, went down. We are unsure about Wisconsin and Michigan at this point, but there are real possibilities for a substantial majority in the Senate for Republicans.
Yeah.
It looked like the House might fall the other way, which would have been the first time in history, I believe, that there was a flip in both directions in different houses. But it looks like Republicans will hold a small majority, at least, in the House after all. Trump did well with Black and Latino men in particular, 24% of Black men for Trump. Harris performed well with above 100K income. Lower and middle income brackets went for Trump. Non-college educated went for Trump. College educated went for Harris. Parents supported Trump over Harris. Gender gap between the parents minimal. This will come into play in our areas. Unmarried women went for Harris in a major way. Trump improved on his 2020 margins in a massive way in pretty much all major metro areas. Manhattan, Brooklyn, Miami, Houston, Chicago. I mean, everywhere.
Yeah, Dallas suburbs. I saw that. And of course,
Yeah.
my home state of New Jersey, I believe that Trump is only down by like 4 points or some insane number like that.
Right. He's kept New Jersey close. Biden won it by 16. It appears she's only up by 5. I believe Illinois was weirdly close at some point last night. And also Virginia, which throughout the night ran 1 point between these two candidates. Biden had won it substantially. Youngkin, of course, the competent, popular Republican governor, had put together a coalition and a operation, importantly, that won in 2021, and clearly some of those people stuck around. It was not enough to bring our friend Hung Cao over the finish line, which is a bummer. We would have loved to see him in the Senate as well. But that's the overview.
Yeah. It's a red wave that came about 2 years late.
That is really what that feels like.
Yeah, and
Um,
even Joe Scarborough said it on Morning Joe that he thought that this was the biggest red wave in his mind since '84 with Reagan. I mean, because
Oh.
but it has yet to sink in. I don't know about our listeners because, you sort of imagine very much like when you picture, as a guy, your wife giving birth to a baby. You have the image in your mind, and then you're actually there at the time, and then afterwards, and then you're like,
you gotta
"What just
process it.
happened?" Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it's surreal, it's surreal. So, I mean, I kind
Yeah.
of thought, but you know how I am. I'm generally pessimistic about these things. So even going into the night yesterday, early evening, I still thought, well, if she's able to hold Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, she still has a path. Even if
Yeah.
Trump takes Georgia and North Carolina, he should anyway, and possibly Nevada. I thought she still has this, and I had switched over from Fox to CNN so that those guys were holding out for a long time.
A long time.
Yeah. So anyway,
I
but
think everyone
yeah,
was everyone was a little cautious with calls last night. I was
very.
watching Decision Desk, and people have been burned in the past, right?
Yeah.
But I was watching Decision Desk, which is a great place for really competent numbers crunching and
Right.
calling, and they were definitely moving quicker. To your point about giving birth, Rob Reiner, filmmaker
Oh
and
no.
liberal
Yeah.
donor and supporter, tweeted, "A woman gave birth to each and every one of us." He wrote this on election day. "Tomorrow, or the day before, tomorrow a woman will give birth to a renewal of our democracy." And I tweeted, "And then our country will wear a large pair of mesh panties with an ice pack in its crotch for a week, and our country will frankly be a little surprised how much it looks forward to a fresh ice pack." So
Wow. Mary Catherine.
so I just helped him along down the
Yeah.
road. Look, that metaphor could have gotten very graphic, and I think I kept it nice and clean.
Well, I was gonna say it's Rob Reiner. He can't handle the truth.
Rob Reiner
But,
probably needs an
yeah,
ice pack on his crotch right about
yeah,
now.
yeah.
So
That's what it feels like, I'm sure.
so yeah, I was at Fox. I was on Fox broadcast, so I was
Mhm.
on, like, the rabbit ears channel, right? Like, the one that you walk up to the TV and change. I was not on the news channel,
Yeah.
and we were watching stuff come in, and I think 2 things around, like, 9:30 or 10. I saw Baldwin County had flipped for Trump in Georgia. Now, this is one of the
Yeah.
counties that I was watching. I cannot take credit
Yes.
for knowing all this. Dave Wasserman clued me
Sure.
into things I should keep an eye on. But Baldwin County, county seat Milledgeville, is not a sort of a exurb county, but it's a county that Hillary had won by like 1.7%
Mhm.
and Biden by 1.3, so a little bit of slippage. And the idea was that excuse me, my brain is awesome. If Trump could flip it, that would mean
Uh-huh.
big things for him in Georgia. So I'm
Yeah.
keeping an eye on that, and it looks very good for him around 9:30 or so. And importantly, Baldwin County is 40% Black. So I thought, if there's really something to this, Baldwin County might be a place where it's happening. And then you
Yeah.
start to see exit polls that suggest that 23% of Black men are voting for Trump. And I
Yeah.
thought, okay, that's a place where that could have happened. Then so that's obviously a part of her coalition she must keep in
Uh-huh.
very, very large numbers. Now, if she doesn't keep them, what does she need? She needs the wine moms, which I wish we had a different name. I don't even really drink wine.
We got a lot of wine in our office. Nobody had it. It was a weird yeah. Okay. Anyway, go ahead.
Oh, I didn't drink at all because I was on
Oh,
set all
really?
night.
I
From
had a little
7
bit.
p.m. to 3 a.m. I was on set. So
Oh, you gotta be on. Yeah, that's not allowed.
yeah. So anyway, the wine moms are what you need to make up for it if you're losing those demographics.
Yeah.
So I see early indicators in the 9 o'clock hour towards 10 o'clock
Mhm.
about Loudoun County, Virginia.
Oh,
Loudoun County, Virginia is quintessential peak
yeah.
wine mom county.
Very,
They are
very.
affluent. They are
Uh-huh.
government workers. They
Yeah.
are
Yeah.
they are blue. Here's the thing. They're also a little bit radicalized during COVID on gender issues and school closings.
Right.
And they were organized by the Youngkin team, who convinced a lot of like former moderate GOP women and
Yeah.
some liberal women to cross over to vote for Youngkin after COVID in that 2021 election. Now, we thought maybe that was all the COVID backlash we would ever see.
Mhm.
But I would suggest that Loudoun County losing, it was like a 9-point swing red toward Trump.
Wow. Yeah.
Biden won it by 25 and she won it by far less. And I just thought, this is what I was seeing in my life. What I
Yeah.
was seeing is that the women in my circles who are centrist
Mhm.
to soft R, I have a lot of liberal women friends too, but I just counted them in the other column.
Yeah.
Soft R, moderate women in my circles in these suburbs were not being reached by Harris. And in fact, were falling like dominoes for Trump. And when I saw Loudoun County, I thought, oh, if she can't do this in the suburbs, she ain't going to do it.
Well, I mean, one of the things, Mary Catherine, that we would say on this show and that I've often thought is it just us? Right? When we talk about on our so many episodes about all the various outrages and the insanity of, from the time of COVID up to now and the Biden Harris administration and their various policies and positions, and you think that you're taking crazy pills. And last night, I mean, you think about Loudoun County, you think about a lot of places across the country. It was reassuring in that sense. And we're not talking about what's going to happen in the future, but it was reassuring to know that other people felt the same way, like, "You
Right.
can't fool us. We know who you are. You're not, like, suddenly new. You've been there." And I
Well,
kept on thinking, are people just gonna forget about things like the border or about schools, you
well,
know?
and this is the thing. I think this is a larger point,
Yeah,
but I think this was sort of an anti-gaslighting election. I called it
that's
last
a
night
good way
on
to put it.
Twitter. This is a "you're full of it" electorate. I
Yeah,
think you people are full of it. I
yeah,
think you're telling me this person is new and she's not. I think you're telling me my economic circumstances are fine and they're not.
mhm,
I think you told me a lot of stuff during COVID that wasn't true and I have learned was true.
yeah,
I think you're telling me that it will be the end of democracy if I vote for this guy who's talking about inflation, by the way. He's talking about my issues.
mhm,
And
that's
they were
right.
just like, nah, it's more important to me to have the inflation thing addressed.
Yeah,
And that is, by the way, bad news for all the mainstream other networks that I've been keeping an eye on today because their version of what this looked like was so wrong
yeah,
once again. And it wasn't a sneak attack like 2016. They they could have seen this
yeah.
and they just refused to.
But
But
they were because they were so vested in it.
yeah,
Like, they had to because, obviously, democracy was at stake. Donald Trump is a monster. They have to they're doing everything they can. Which jobs report comes out just last week, and they're not gonna talk about it.
they ignored
Doug
it.
Emhoff is credibly accused, not gonna talk about it.
Yeah.
We gotta do everything we can, and I think you're right, and then the rest of us out here were like, "Wait a minute," you know, living in a different world, and
Yep.
and clearly they were just living in denial, you know?
Um There, by the way, we have a this is a fun clip that we'll play from before the election. This is Michael Beschloss
Oh,
on
yeah.
MSNBC talking about what will happen if Trump is elected.
Nothing even remotely similar. You want to go into history to look for something like this? Go into Italian history and look at Mussolini. This is the way dictators come to power. He's telling you what he intends to do. And we've got to make very sure that in the next 5.5 weeks and after that, we do not get in a situation where, just as Senator Sanders was saying tonight, Donald Trump announces that he's won and puts us in a situation where our democracy is being stolen minute by minute. This is not a drill. Franklin Roosevelt said in 1940, at the time of Adolf Hitler, never before since Jamestown and Plymouth Rock has American civilization been in this kind of danger. We are approaching that point tonight.
So yeah, there will be no more it's the end of American history,
Yeah,
Vic,
well,
and also books.
as yes, and books, as it's that great cliche about history being written by the victors, and I guess that's what's going to happen now. I mean, it would be kind of funny if they had like as a practical joke, if you knew somebody and you were able to, knock on the door and pretend that you were going to be taken away, it's, yeah. It's like,
I just
just as a prank, just as a
well,
prank. Oh, we're here. It's time for you to get in the bus.
Well,
Yeah,
and here's the thing that's tricky for the left and for much
yeah,
of the media, particularly the progressives who lead the Democratic Party, who clearly missed a wholesale
yeah.
misunderstanding of this electorate and did not understand how to talk to anyone, is you have to look at, well, actually, Jewish voters you can add in there too. You have to look
Yes,
at Latino voters,
and
Black
Arab
voters.
voters too.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You have to look at Latino voters, Black voters,
Yeah,
suburban women, Arab and Jewish voters, and say, you're all sexist and racist in order
that's
for that
right.
worldview to survive.
Yeah.
Because large chunks went the way they didn't want them to
Mhm.
go. Large chunks of suburban women heard
Yeah.
an argument of Liz Cheney and abortion, and they were
Yeah.
like, I don't know, that's not enough for me.
As you know, there are, elements of the far left that were very unhappy with the Harris-Walz campaign strategy of trying to court, the Liz Cheney types and play that up, that angle up. And they're like, you're not going to win any more votes from, from these potential, from what, the neocons or something,
Well, I'm
and
the
that you're
voter.
actually going to turn off other voters
Yes, well,
they're not
I'm the
going to care.
voter for
They're not going
that,
to care.
right? I'm the
Right.
voter.
Yeah.
And I'm not a Liz Cheney hater. By the way, I have to say she
No.
looks fantastic. I'm not a hater, but it's not going to move me,
Mm-mm.
nor is the issue of abortion,
No, but you
right?
could lose. You could lose other voters in the process. Yeah.
Yes. So I think they were like, box checked. We put
Yep.
Liz Cheney on
Mhm.
stage. What's the
Oh,
problem?
they spent time
And
on
I
it.
just
They
don't
had,
think that
yeah.
worked. So I felt like I was getting like early suggestions that all of these
Mhm.
groups were going to act differently than the media
Yeah.
had told you they would act, and that the Harris campaign
Yeah.
suggested they would act.
Right.
The other county was Osceola County in Florida,
Florida.
which
Yeah.
is a huge Puerto Rican constituency, which, remember, we were told
Yeah.
the Madison Square Garden
Oh,
joke
yeah.
was gonna be the thing.
Yeah. That
And this
turned
is
the,
like,
yeah.
again, look, I was willing to entertain the notion that these endorsements might have a tiny, tiny, tiny impact,
Right.
but that was a full court press coverage
Oh,
moment.
it was like trying to make fetch a thing, right?
Yes.
They're
And
like, oh, this is it. Yeah.
it turns out in Osceola County that didn't work at all with
Mhm.
Latino. That just wasn't a thing with Latino voters. They cared more about their financial circumstance and the
Yeah.
fact probably that they have a very successful and competent Republican governor who has convinced them that, voting
Right.
this way works for them. Also, Republicans won the gubernatorial race in, wait for it, Puerto Rico.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. So, I mean, the left and the mainstream media are just now trying to process how and why America is so bad.
I know.
I mean, this morning, for example, the first thing I check my email and I get the New York Times. I'm on their, email list for the paper, and I see, this is exciting. I said the breaking news is the email subject header, and it says Trump wins sweeping election victory. Wow, that's a pretty big concession from the Times. And then the headline is Trump storms back. Great. Okay. Wow. And then it says, and then here's just a little teaser before they have the read more part, because it's just when you click on the email, which is this from the New York Times. Donald Trump returns to power, ushering in new era of uncertainty. He played on fears of immigrants and economic worries to defeat Vice President Kamala Harris. His victory signaled the advent of isolationism, sweeping tariffs, and score settling. That's it.
There you go.
That's the
There you go.
takeaway.
Well done, guys. You know which kind of voters responded quite well on immigration? First of all of them.
Yeah.
Huge numbers of everyone. Latino voters.
Yeah. Yeah. That's
And
right.
actually, somebody on MSNBC was a little bit lamenting. I believe it was Jay Johnson, who was a
Oh boy.
Obama era
Yeah, of course.
guy, and he
DHS.
said,
He was Homeland Security.
yes, that's right. Thank you. But he was saying, look, as minority communities come to the US and are assimilated into the US, and they tend to start thinking about other issues beyond their identity, and
Yeah.
they don't identify with exactly the things that Democrats say they should. And he
Exactly.
sounded like a little wistful about it. And I was like,
but
I
that,
mean,
yeah.
so they're regular people? They're regular
Yeah.
Americans.
You mean they think as individuals and not just skin color or culture? Like, hey, you're brown, they're brown. Why don't you think the same? I mean, this is
Yeah.
a kind of a weird thing. So again, I've mentioned this before about a friend of ours, Mary Katharine, who way back in his youth had worked for Cesar Chavez, right, in California, and representing all the Latino, Hispanic fruit pickers and everything
Right.
else. And he said that, yeah, he was a hard leftist. He was big on, big, very pro-labor and pro-rights of the working class and these poor immigrants. But the one thing that our friend said was that Cesar Chavez was also fiercely against the illegal immigrants coming over the border, into
Yes.
California. Like, hey, wait a minute, you guys, what are you doing? You're going
Yeah.
to ruin a great thing here. And so I think that is correct. And I mean, there are a lot of cultural implications about that. including that, once you enter sort of this category of prosperity and you come to this country, you also have fewer kids. That's one of the weirdest things ever. You know what I
Right.
mean? It's just the general trend. But yeah, as you were saying, the Latino voters who chose Trump, and there are a lot of them, especially in states like
Mhm.
Michigan, who chose and black voters, they have other concerns. And this
Yes.
is what's befuddling the
I know.
left
You know what?
is why can't you just fit in the box?
Women have other concerns too, it turns out.
Right.
And now, look, the place where the play worked was unmarried
Mhm,
women, but that was your most secure constituency,
mhm.
right? Like
Yeah.
that was base service. And as I said, Liz Cheney and abortion was not enough to get people who have other concerns
Right.
to come on over.
Mhm.
Can we talk about some of the weird exit poll numbers?
Oh, yeah, I'd love to talk about polls. Before I forget, since you were talking just briefly on the topic of women and abortion, everyone's like, "This is it. This is why Kamala Harris is gonna win." I don't know if you saw yesterday, I happened to see the most obnoxious political cartoon of the
Oh, really?
cycle. Yes, and it's a dad,
Oh,
and he's
yes.
filling out his ballot, and the little girl says to him, "Daddy," she says, "Who are you voting for?" And he's looking at her, he says, "I voted for you."
Yeah. Can
A
we
little
talk
bit too
about like
much on the
how
nose.
because they're in their bubble,
Yeah.
none of them understand that parents saying, and I understand, they feel that they're voting for autonomy to a great
Yes,
degree and like
sure.
personal liberty. Okay.
Yeah.
But the passion with
Oh,
which parents argue that they're voting for their children's ability to abort their future grandchildren,
it's
it's off-putting.
it's dark.
It's a
Yeah,
lot for me, and they were
yeah,
really throwing a lot of it at us.
yeah. It's culture of death stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I did not respond well to that message.
Yeah, and obviously not just you.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about polling.
Polling, yeah.
Obviously,
Should we go right to
large
Ann Selzer first? Do you wanna go to Ann Selzer first?
well, this is
Uh,
okay, this is the "you're full of it" electorate.
yeah,
What did they do? They grabbed the one poll. Now, to be
uh-huh.
fair, Ann Selzer does have a good reputation.
Track record, yeah,
She's the
sure.
Iowa
Mhm.
pollster.
Did.
She has a good track record, but she comes up with this result: Harris +3 in Iowa. Now, if that's true, Trump is cooked all
Yeah,
over the
that's right.
Midwest. He's cooked in the blue wall because he should be leading Iowa by a lot more. I believe he's up in Iowa. I believe it's 13 points.
Yeah,
This is a 17
a
point miss.
as of this taping, yeah.
By the way, we now have our answer. Trump was underpolled.
Yes, right. That was the question about how are they weighing weighting the Trump are they remember because there was a big thing and I've talked about this myself. Are they overemphasizing? We don't know yet.
Yeah. Can we shout out our friend, Kristen Soltis Anderson, who was working the graveyard shift on CNN last night,
Okay.
but
Yeah.
she and her partner at Echelon Insights, Patrick Ruffini, put out a poll on Pennsylvania at the very end that was +5 Trump. And they got a lot of flack for it from the establishment
Oh,
and conventional
yeah.
narrative creators
I'm
who
sure that
said,
was
"No, no, no,
upsetting.
this is nonsense." Pennsylvania, though, right now is like a several point win for Trump.
Yeah.
So I would just like to nominate KSA as the new Ann Selzer.
Yeah. Better than a really greater
No,
sign,
but
Ann Selzer.
some huge misses here. There's a great clip last night, and I'm not sure what time of the evening this was,
Mhm.
but Jake Tapper's talking to John King about where Kamala Harris outperformed Biden, because that's what we were looking for.
Yeah.
We were looking for,
That's right.
is she hitting Biden's numbers? When I'm looking in those counties, I'm looking at where Biden was, and I'm
Right.
looking if she's under it.
Right.
Here's what they hear when they're going through the magic wall with John King, who's great at that, by the way.
Places. So you asked, are there any places that the vice president is overperforming Joe Biden in 2020? So we could show you that as well. We just bring that out here. Harris overperforming in 2020.
Holy smokes.
There you go. So let this go away and see if there's anything on the east side there.
Literally nothing?
Literally nothing.
Literally not one county?
So they're looking at the magic wall, and he takes away the blue and the red to isolate counties where
Yeah.
Kamala Harris outperformed Joe Biden,
Right.
and there's nothing there.
I
And he then moves the menu. You know how sometimes something on your
Yes.
computer is
Yes, yeah, you
covered
slide.
by like
Yeah. Uh-huh.
another open
Uh-huh.
app.
Uh-huh.
He moves the thing so that we can see the East Coast. So maybe there's something
Yeah.
in the Northeast.
Right.
There's nothing. There's nowhere. Now, I don't know if this holds for the entire
Sure.
country at this point, but nothing in that moment, no county where she
Yeah.
overperforms Biden is devastating news for her
Well,
chances.
I give props to Jake Tapper for only saying "holy smokes"
I know.
for that reaction. But I mean, again, because everybody thinks, oh, or they kid themselves into believing that she's amazing in so many other ways that Joe Biden isn't. She still has it with her. She has her wits about her.
Right.
She's this dynamic, hardworking woman. She has, a Black American or Indian and a prosecutor and all these different things. And they've run cover for her for so long. Well, now we actually see what the truth is.
Well, and
And that she was not a great, I'm sure we can get into, I look forward to the part of our episode where we get into the recriminations, but
I know.
she's just not a good candidate.
We should start before we get into
Yeah.
those. We should say huge congratulations to the Donald Trump team
Oh yeah.
who pulled this off and reached. And this is a thing that, again, a lot of folks who did not support Trump in 2016 and 2020
Mhm.
got so anti-Trump that I think a lot of them had trouble recognizing a thing that I make a point of recognizing, which is that this person grew the coalition in ways that I've been saying we should
Yeah.
for decades, but he did it in this wackadoodle way
Yeah. That only he
that
could.
that I wouldn't have known to
Right.
do it. And look, sometimes it comes, frequently, it comes with populist economic ideas that I am not a huge fan of, right?
Mhm.
But I'm losing that argument while the
Yeah.
coalition is gaining these voters,
Right.
right? So I have to win the argument. This is part of the game. And I have to recognize what he's done. And they did it in a huge way
If-
yesterday.
If you think about after the Mitt Romney loss in 2012, and we've spoken about this as well, the Republican post-mortem investigation of what we did wrong and how we can win back, and increase the minority vote. The truth is, yeah, I think all these other Republican candidates who I like, and agree with more on other things, they would have done fine, I guess. But I don't think any of them could have pulled off winning the number of working class voters or male voters, and certainly Black and Hispanic voters that Donald Trump has. He's created this really remarkable coalition that it's going to be hard to replicate if you're not
Well-
the Trump brand of populist. There's all these people, who are around him and great, but then you try to picture them. It's like it was like George H.W. Bush trying to pick up, and keep the Reagan coalition together, which he was able to do for one term. But what he's done is remarkable, and I don't know if Republicans in the future will be able to keep that together. And it's like only him. It's
Well,
insane.
I think what Democrats have learned the hard way over many elections now is that the Obama coalition wasn't necessarily a coalition.
Yeah,
It was an Obama creation that did not then travel with the
Right.
party. So the question is whether this is a Trump coalition or if it's a Trump creation that then exits as soon as he does. I do think they deserve immense credit for what they did trying to turn out this bro vote, because I kept saying this is interesting what they're doing, but do they have a pipeline
Yeah.
from Theo Von's podcast to the ballot box?
right.
Now,
Or Joe Rogan, for that matter.
I don't actually know what that looked like on the campaign. I heard different things about how they were doing this kind of
Mhm.
stuff. But I think just hitting those podcasts several times,
Right.
it wasn't just one. So it's like Theo Von has Donald Trump, then JD Vance.
Right.
Rogan has Donald Trump, then JD Vance, then Elon
Right.
Musk. Then Elon Musk convinces Joe Rogan
Yeah.
that Joe Rogan should endorse Donald Trump the day before the election. Now,
Yeah.
that might be a little late in the game, but it also might be for 23-year-old dudes who are sitting on their couches.
Okay.
Oh, it's election day? Maybe I'll just go do that. Right.
That's
Maybe-
right. And
maybe
we
that
talked
works.
about this too, which is that the female vote is more reliable than the male vote, let alone the, what is turnout like for the bro vote, right? I
Right.
mean, will they actually, get up, stand online, cast a vote if they haven't done early voting yet? And we weren't sure. They obviously came out in droves.
By the
But
way,
again, but so did other segments.
Right. By the way, men 18 to 29 +2 for Harris. So Harris won them, but not by a lot. 18
Yeah.
to 29, that's a devastating number for her among that age
Right.
cohort. Women 18 to 29 +27 Harris.
Yeah,
A
that's big.
25-point difference. But one of the things we kept seeing in exit polls and people kept talking about is that young people as a bloc were not going to be as liberal as Democrats were hoping they were. They were
Yeah,
seeing
that
these
what they
huge
assumed.
lines on university
Oh,
campuses,
and thinking.
but in the counties where university campuses were and you were seeing these huge lines, they were not seeing the numbers for them that they needed to see, I think
Yeah.
because there were defections in
Right.
this age category, which is forming this is the thing I will say for Trump, whether this coalition sticks around, forming a habit between 18 and 29 of going out voting for a party, and
Yeah.
by the way, notching a win, which feels better than losing,
Right.
that might keep you around for a little while.
Right. It's funny because the media loves to report on record turnout because I think in their minds they equate that to a big win for Democrats, and
They're
it's
not
true
gonna
traditionally.
anymore.
No, I mean remember the whole thing was bad weather could it might not maybe not a lot of people are going to go out to vote. That's good for Republicans. We used to say this all the time, and this is turnout, and it was turnout for Trump. I mean you're seeing this across the board. So this is one thing I think we sort of just glided over briefly, which is aside from the electoral sweep, Trump has won the popular vote. And it's the first time since 2004
Yes,
that a
thank you for
Republican has
mentioning
done
that.
this.
One
Yeah,
one
this
of the
is
things that I was hoping for,
amazing.
and I said it on set last night, and I know my Democratic counterparts, this is not the way they wanted to come to it, but I did say I was hoping for a decisive win. And I thought it
Yeah,
was more likely that he won. And so I wanted him to win both the Electoral College and the popular vote,
right.
because I think that saves us from the consternation and possible
Oh,
constitutional crisis of fighting over that. So to me, that's a good result. And I know that so many on the left, look, I have deep concerns about Donald Trump as well.
mhm.
Not as
Oh,
deep and not as apocalyptic
yeah,
as my friends on the left, but
right.
I understand their concerns. And yet, they must recognize that when they call for unity, when they say, oh, he
Yeah,
needs to be much more unifying, he needs to do this and this and that, he has a bit of a mandate here.
yeah,
I'm not sure how you unify with people who called you a fascist Nazi garbage person, but
right. He,
but
it,
like this,
yeah,
the thing is, we actually, I know this is gonna blow the left's mind. The country is more unified behind Donald Trump
yeah,
as a result of this election. Like there are more, it's a more diverse coalition than the Republicans have ever
right.
had. It crosses a bunch of state lines. It's urban voters, it's rural voters. By the way, huge numbers of rural voters came out in droves. This is an interesting and diverse and covering a lot of different walks of American life coalition.
As this is beginning to sink in, Mary Catherine, I have to say, J- Joe Scarborough on Morning Joe, his sentiment again, I think is correct. This is bigger than I think a lot of us think or were obviously expecting. Even those of us who were hopeful and thought that Trump could squeak out a win, he didn't squeak it out. And the good thing for him and his supporters is that by winning the popular vote, I mean, it totally takes away that argument of, he's not legitimately the president because of this
Yes.
stupid system that we need to remove. This was Lawrence O'Donnell on MSNBC. He was railing against the Electoral College earlier yesterday because the assumption is that Donald Trump might win it because of that. But obviously, the majority of Americans do not like him. You take that off the table, I have a feeling they're not going to make as much of a demand for that. And
Yeah.
obviously, suddenly I'm going to assume they're not going to be arguing to remove the filibuster
Yeah,
and
no.
pack the Supreme Court.
By the way,
Maybe they're not going to be into that
just
right
as a
now.
level set, whether my preferred candidate had won or lost the Electoral College last night, I would still
Mhm,
support the Electoral College.
mhm.
I do not want to pack the Supreme Court, and I do not want to get rid of the filibuster.
Yeah.
My beliefs remain the same
Yes.
on that
Yes.
front. You noted like he's the legitimate president.
Right.
When I used to say on CNN, he's the duly elected president of the United States. People did not like that because remember, the fever dream has always
Yeah.
been that Russia elected him,
Right. In
and he
16.
was a Russian plant in
Yeah.
2016. And then we spent 4 years talking about that, right?
Yeah. Mhm.
It was a fabrication. This is another level of the
Yeah.
"you're full of it" electorate,
Although
right?
I should let you know that had just heard late last night on MSNBC, Joy Reid still insisting that there is a Russia meddling. Obviously, that had an impact on the current election So, I mean, we don't know, and they're
It's
still counting
always
votes. They're still counting votes, Mary Catherine. I also wanted to point out, you know, good on the rest of the media, including NBC, for saying Donald Trump has won this election with at least 272, 275
Yeah.
electoral votes, whatever the current number is, while they're still counting Nevada, Arizona, et cetera, for some strange reason, Maine. But the Harris campaign itself has not yet conceded as of the taping.
you could really this was a moment where you were really like, "Oh, is this Hillary 2.0?"
Yeah.
Because she did not come out to address the crowd at Howard University. I understand, by the way, she was having her party at Howard, which is like an
Yes.
HBCU. It's a different vibe than a lot
Her
of
alma mater, too.
yeah, it's a different vibe than like DC in general.
Yeah.
But having all your major events in DC, I just feels like was so obviously like I'm the establishment installed candidate
Right.
and I'm
Yeah.
only going to do large events in
Yeah.
the nation's capital instead of out in
Yeah.
the country where I'm supposed to be. Obviously, she
Right.
did other events out there, but I just wanted to note that MSNBC, led by Chris Hayes, I can play this little clip for you guys, is already looking for its new Russiagate.
We still have an electorate, 70 million plus, that will be voting for a man who said he was going to assassinate for treason the chairman of the Joint Chiefs because he didn't support him on January the 6th, who has said just in recent days he was going to execute Liz Cheney with a firing squad, 9 guns pointed and shooting at her face. A man who has said that he was going to shut down CBS because he didn't like how they edited an interview. A man who said he was going to be a dictator from day one. A man who said he was going to terminate the Constitution. A man who said he was going to use the army and he was going to use the National Guard on his political opponents. I literally could go on all day, and yet you talk to Trump voters and they'll go, he didn't say that. Wait, now I didn't hear him. And then you say, well, here's the quote, and then they'll go, yeah, he didn't mean that. So there's something far more long-lasting than just Donald Trump, the candidate. There is a sort of Russian embrace of disinformation, a radical devaluing of truth over the last 9 to 10 years, and a complete ignorance on civics and what the term Madisonian democracy even means, what checks and balances even means, what judicial review even means, what the rule of law even means. How do we as a nation, even post-Trump, how do we reach those Americans who apparently didn't go to civics class, apparently didn't learn the basics of this Constitution, and have just been overwhelmed with this information over the past 9 years?
Okay, some of this is anodyne, but the work of the Fourth Estate and the work of institutions come together in the case of Russiagate. As soon as Donald Trump was elected last time,
Yeah.
they were like, let's hang a thing on him that makes him an illegitimate president.
Yeah.
Let's manufacture it from a Clinton-funded, obviously nonsense dossier.
Right.
Say he's a Russian plant, use the intelligence community and a willing media to launder it, and then torture the American people with it for several years.
Yeah.
I would suggest that they should not do that again. The Fourth Estate should not do that again, and the intelligence community should not help. The institutions should not help them do that.
I wonder, because this is his last go around, right? I mean, this is the end for him. And he had actually said that he wasn't going to run again, regardless of win or lose. But now that he's in it, after, January 2029, he's done, and that's it. I wonder if the left and that entire apparatus is just too exhausted to have to continue this fight against him, because it
Actually,
certainly takes a lot out of the
I
American
think
people.
it was Dan Foster who tweeted something along these lines last night. And I thought it was a clever way to put it, where he said, they were trying to tell Americans that they were exhausted by Donald Trump. And instead of exhausting the normies, what they did was exhaust the resistance.
Yeah, they did. They wore it down.
Like and look, some of my counterparts on TV last night were saying, like, there are people who are genuinely scared of this result. And I understand that. Look,
because
And
they've
I
been told to over
and I
and
don't
over.
want to discount that they are scared. I don't think that they should,
No.
like on Georgetown campus, have a room with Legos and cookies and milk to play with, because I think you should learn to self-soothe
Mhm.
as an adult in different ways.
Yes, when I was there,
And
we just went to the tombs.
yeah, and also buy your own Legos. Like, anyway,
It's so sad.
but I understand that there are real concerns. I have concerns about him. And I
Yeah.
was kind of like, if they end up without the House, divided government is a
Mhm.
fine outcome for me. But the other part of that, and this is the you're full of it electorate,
Yeah.
is that the people who voted for Donald Trump didn't follow your orders to be as upset about Donald Trump as you are, even when
Mhm.
he did very bad things.
Yeah.
These groups are not giving you, like, they're not giving way to your judgment
Yeah.
about this,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And what you did, it always cracks me up too when like the New York Times and all these people say, they said it on NBC this morning, that like it was a campaign about fear. And I'm like, have you guys listened to yourself? And this
Right.
is the gaslighting part where it's like, we're the ones doing the fear.
Right.
You're calling half the country fascist Nazi garbage. Like
Yeah.
that's pretty. And the abortion ads are very, very fear-based. And I would say that a lot of those people are scared because their own party made them scared
Yeah. That
to a degree that they shouldn't. And that doesn't mean that
that's right.
January 6th doesn't matter and that it wasn't a
No.
huge and traumatic deal. It
Sure.
was.
It's terrible.
But I would suggest that trying to make it 9/11 backfired.
Yes. And again, there were certain things that were, that were outrages, like January 6th, obviously, and I get it, and I agree, it was terrible. But then there were other things that they would completely downplay, like, the riots after George Floyd, and that was something not to pay
Yes.
attention
The
to.
gaslighting.
Yeah, again,
Mhm.
the gaslighting. So there's a lot of that. Do we think, by the way, that Kamala speaks, she has to concede today, doesn't she? Or is she going to wait for what?
It's been called by everyone, so I assume she's gonna have to do a speech this morning.
Yeah,
She should call Trump. Everyone had a long night last night, I get it, but this is so we've been talking for a while, we barely talked
I
about
know.
Kamala Harris, which is actually
Yeah, I know
fitting because she was a total non-entity. Like, I think maybe the starkest contrast between those two candidates is you had maybe the most authentic candidate to a fault
yeah, right.
in Donald Trump and the least authentic candidate you could possibly have in Kamala Harris. Someone who does not know her own mind, who doesn't know how to communicate her beliefs, who we're not
Mhm.
sure if she has beliefs or what they
That's right.
are, and is totally uncomfortable communicating that to anyone.
It's the old, political cliche of, voters would rather choose the devil they know than they don't know, right? And to compound it, that particular, person doesn't even know herself.
Yeah.
Where does she stand? Because she wouldn't answer. And that was an actual strategy of not giving definite answers to a lot of questions. And, it's Alex, what's his name? We'll go blanking out on his name over at Axios, who has been very good about following the Harris campaign,
Yeah.
and
Alex
saying,
Thompson.
that's right, Alex Thompson, and making a list of things where, no comment candidate. And they thought that was a winning strategy. But as you said, with Donald Trump, he says whatever's on his mind. He is not, you're going to hate it. There's a good chance if he's going to not say all the time the things that you want to hear, but he's letting you know at that moment what he's thinking. And she was the exact opposite, and everything
Yeah.
was so staged, and she had everybody helping her, sort of just push her along and try to tell us, and again, and gaslight us, saying that, oh no, she's great, she's amazing, she's smart, and all these different
Yeah,
things. Yeah.
I think a lot of people, particularly, actually, I would say this might be a class issue and why the educated class preferred her to Donald Trump in such numbers. People will forgive more in an authentic a-hole
Yeah.
than an inauthentic
Right.
person who's saying the right things sometimes. Like
I,
that,
I think so.
especially because
that's
he's
right.
entertaining. And that's another part that he deserves credit for. This
Yeah.
is a person who people have known forever.
Yeah.
And everyone has an idea in their head about him. And in the closing weeks of this campaign, there were undisciplined moments that I think the Madison Square Garden thing was not good.
No,
It just,
no, I still
like,
think it wasn't
there
good.
are
I mean, it was
undisciplined
bad,
moments. He should have been
right.
talking about that jobs report for the entire end of the campaign.
Right.
However, proof's in the pudding. Like, he won. And I think one of the reasons he won is because when he was at McDonald's, when he's wearing that vest,
Mhm.
he's entertaining and he is hearkening back to the fun celebrity cameo Donald Trump
Yeah.
of the 90s and
Yeah.
2000s
That's right.
that people
Plus The
enjoy,
Apprentice. Yeah.
and they don't find him scary in that version of himself.
Right. So the idea that, especially, media member, journalists saying that they're going to be on some list and they're going to be taken away or something there, nobody's going to buy that, and so that's the one thing I have to say, by the way, that, last night when Kamala sent out a spokesman at the big party to tell everybody to go home, it did remind me of 2000 and turning on the TV at like 3 or 4 a.m. and Bill Daley out there saying that the campaign continues. I'm like, please don't do this. And then Jen O'Malley Dillon, of course, who runs the campaign, she sent out that memo to all the volunteers telling them to, quote, get some sleep.
Yeah, when
the
the
battle
memo
continues tomorrow.
when the memo says get some sleep, that means the party is over.
Yeah, the party is over. And in fact, my understanding is that once on CNN, they had made some reference to it being, a big night for Trump, they switched over to music.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and that was it, And,
Yeah.
and by the way, the other telling thing is we had two reporters. We had Joe Simonson and Andrew Stiles were at Mar-a-Lago reporting, and they said, as the night wore on, at the Trump party, they would be switching over to CNN. That's how confident you are when you're able to switch over and see that, and it's just a certain level of schadenfreude,
For
I
sure.
imagine.
Like,
Yeah,
I'm glad her campaign wasn't rewarded.
yeah,
Well, I have issues with both candidates, but I think not giving interviews, doing this sprint campaign that didn't put
didn't
you
work.
through any of the hoops that you
No.
are supposed to go through for voters. It's not that I want campaigns to be 2 years long, but your party's voters should get a say. You should be asked a lot of questions.
Yeah,
You should be tested. Now, Donald Trump went through a primary, and an annoyance to me, he did not show up on the debate stage, but he didn't have to. Like,
right.
I lost that argument. I would have liked other candidates, but he did go through the paces in a way that she didn't, and he's done it several times.
Right, and Harris, by the way, sorry to cut you off here. She's also done it several times, in which in 2020 she didn't win a single vote and had to drop out of the race during the Democratic primaries, and then she didn't get a single vote in the primaries, of course, because of the circumstances in this race. So she didn't
Yeah.
get any votes
No, I'm
until the
glad it
general.
wasn't rewarded because I think it's good for candidates to be available and to do
Yeah.
even these things like long form interviews, which, by the way, I think him using these podcasts, A, worked,
Yeah.
B, didn't cost them any money. All they had to do was go and sit for an interview,
Yeah,
and undermines the official narrative, which should be undermined because it's incorrect. It is
Yeah.
a bad read. And then you know what that does? That helps alternative media because a bunch of people listen to those podcasts and they go, oh, this is so much more right than the alleged experts that I'm supposed to listen to on my TV. Right. So she should have done some of that. Candidates in the future should do some of that. And I like hearing them go a
Mhm.
little off script. I
Yeah.
like hearing them talk about weird things. And I feel like Donald Trump has given us a sometimes rowdy and ridiculous and sometimes inappropriate
Yeah.
new way of doing business that is so far from the days when we used to yell, "What about your gaffes?" at
We're-
Mitt Romney.
That's
That's
right.
an old
That's
line
right.
from the
That is an old
2000 is it
yeah,
2012 election where he didn't like Romney basically did nothing wrong
Yeah.
ever, right? And I think he went on a Europe trip, maybe he's in
That poor
Britain,
guy.
and
Yeah.
they're alleging that he did. It's all these tiny, tiny, tiny little things that now Donald Trump has changed the landscape to such a degree that no one would have. It wouldn't be a story.
Okay. I have here's a
And they're
question.
just yelling at Mitt Romney.
Yeah.
What about your gaffes?
So yeah, I remember who said it too. But so the thing for me is, every morning I get the transcript service Grabian. I'm on their email list, and every morning they tell you the highlights of various sound bites across the media. It is not a healthy way to start your day, but I go through my emails just to
Right.
see what's unread, and I click it on, and I can't help it. And the first thing that it usually works backwards from the most recent thing, and then it goes backwards in time for the day. So what do you see is the first thing you see is the late night shows. And
Yeah.
I wonder, because obviously they weren't on last night, but I think about Colbert, Kimmel, the Daily Show, TDS. How are they going to handle this? Because again, they have spent so much time going after not just Trump and the people who work for Trump, but anyone who supports Trump and making fun of Republicans, and just like as if they're this tiny wacko minority of
Mhm.
either, weird and racist and whatever else, and so many jokes about Trump, and the punchline is always because he's going to be in jail. You know, he's going
Right.
to lose. He's going to be in
Because
jail, and he's a
we're putting
Nazi.
our political opponents in jail. By the way, another great thing that was not rewarded last night.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Making up laws to
Yeah.
put
yeah.
cobbling together Frankenstein felonies to
Right.
put your opponent in jail.
Right.
Bad.
Yeah.
Don't do it.
The new and surprising crime of mislabeling a business expense or overvaluing your real estate. But how do these people, how do these the late night shows, how do they handle the fact that a majority of the United States of America, voted for the person you said was a monster? And do they acknowledge it? Do they care that they're insulting slightly more than half of the country? I really wonder about that. I mean, because what's going through in their mind that, wait a minute, in addition to why our rating's so low, is how is it that after all this time, Americans feel this way? And I don't know how they're going to handle it.
Well, and trust is so low. I mean, trust is like below Congress's at this point for the media. And part of it is just like, I'm looking at this panel on MSNBC right now. I looked at one last night. Not one of those people has ever come close to voting for Trump.
Yeah.
Or to like encountering people who voted for Trump, unless they encounter an occasional guest on this set who's
Right.
brought in for one day to be the punching bag. But
Yeah.
there are half the country out there who support this person, and they're
Mhm.
so far from understanding that
Yeah.
and why it happened. And
And
so
it's not
you just
yeah, I'm sorry.
you just keep looking at these
Yeah.
panels of experts and going,
Right.
you don't know though. You're so far from normal people.
Right.
So far.
And the topper, of course, is that, they would so love to just blame this on, quote unquote, uneducated white men.
Right.
But there's only so many of them. And then they find themselves having to what? Berate and lecture blacks and Latinos?
Well, this is the thing. The
Because
beauty of Trump's
good luck with that.
coalition is that it's very hard for them to do that. And
Yes, exactly.
I hope that the identity politics, I mean, this was in some ways, now I don't want to assume that everything I dislike was punished, but that does feel like there was an anti-woke vibe here. Like
I do. I feel that too.
y'all's crazy is
Yeah.
not what we're interested in. And I know liberals believe that nothing they do is crazy. All of it is just and wonderful. But
Right.
but that's not how regular voters feel. They
Right,
do believe some
about
of those things are crazy.
That's right, like men playing in women's sports or transgender surgeries or for minors or for illegal immigrants or prisoners and trying
Or
to tell
arresting
us
people for having barbecues at their house.
yeah,
Like
that's right.
there was a lot of
Or
stuff.
raising a squirrel.
Yeah. Ugh, R.I.P. That one makes me sad.
See?
But
We
I
did
think
it for
there's
Peanut.
I think there's a lot in the mix
Yeah.
where again, as we talk about on the show frequently, self-regard is such a huge blind spot.
Oh,
And if
yeah.
you're sure that you are morally better and intellectually better than
Mhm.
everyone else who could have a different take, you're
Mhm.
going to miss things. And
Yeah.
the media just misses most of America, half of America.
You can't help but think that what kind of awful thoughts they must have, for example, when they learn, like I heard yesterday, Luzerne County in Pennsylvania, the majority of Hispanics voted for Trump.
Yeah.
How do they address that?
By the way, one of the reasons is because Trump spoke to those voters. He went to Reading, Pennsylvania several times. Vance
Mhm.
went. Kamala Harris did not go there after 2023. So she never went as the nominee. And like those things matter to people.
Right. And again, he is just more relatable than she is.
Yeah.
To all these people, it's like, oh, how can they vote for Trump? Well, how can they vote for her?
Well,
You
and
know,
I know that they have to say she did the thing. We appreciate her. She did it on a short time schedule.
Mhm. Yeah,
You know,
no,
give,
that's
give
true.
her her flowers. And she
Yeah.
was in a bad position, but she was put in a bad position by her party.
Yeah, they were all complicit because they had pushed this thing all along.
And then she got the
yeah.
greatest media launch
Oh,
that you could ever have
yeah.
gotten.
Double
so she had
honeymoon bounce.
advantages.
They got her, they had her back. They would cover for her. I remember some members of the media, of course, say, She doesn't have to take interviews. Why should she have to do that? Why
Yes.
does she have to address specifics? That's a terrible idea of talking about policy. What happens, Mary Catherine, to all the celebrities? I believe it was every single celebrity
Every
ever
single one.
that ever existed who supported and came out for Kamala Harris. Like you think about Beyonce, Taylor Swift. I saw at the very last minute Anne Hathaway. Oh goodness, Cardi B.
Well,
Usher.
and
I'm,
this
I'm
is
look. I have a list right here.
again,
Springsteen, Lizzo,
this
Legend.
is this is
Whatever.
part of the gaslighting too. Like
Yeah.
Harrison Ford is like, you got to vote for Harris because of freedom of speech, I think was his argument. And like
Whose argument was that?
Harrison Ford.
Oh man,
And because like he wants
it's
to
killing
jail
me here.
his opponents.
Yeah.
Again, I
Yeah.
have concerns
Says-
about Donald Trump and him
Yeah.
not understanding the limits of his power. Okay.
Sure.
I
Sure.
dealt with that for 4 years and talked about it frequently. However, it's exaggerated by many. But I noted on TV last night when someone brought this up, Steve Bannon just got out of jail. Judge Merchan is talking this week in the New York Times about like thinking through how he can put Trump in jail and win.
Yeah.
Okay. For the made up
Amazing.
felony. And what was the third one? Oh, yeah. The Democratic Attorney General of Arizona actively investigating
Oh,
Donald
right.
Trump for his sentences about Liz Cheney. So, like,
Yeah.
again, your nose isn't clean on this, and people see what you're doing.
hmm
Stop lecturing them.
Well, and the other thing that drives me nuts is like I can't believe that America chose this rapist. A convicted rapist. What exactly are we talking about here? Are we talking about the incident that happened at the Bergdorf Goodman, where the
This
woman,
is the E. Jean Carroll.
E. Jean Carroll, who then
yeah.
who only remembers this now, and doesn't actually remember when it happened, and
Well-
it's like, again, they're trying to make this thing.
Also, like,
Okay, I have to-
party of
yeah.
Bill Clinton and JFK, like a
Yeah.
lot of people have just assessed
Yeah,
that
well,
this
there's
is
that
not a
too.
thing that we have to worry about.
Right,
in a
because it
candidate.
wasn't for them. They covered for them, and it was okay. It was okay then. Did you want to talk briefly before we? I don't know how we're doing on time here.
We got a few more minutes. So
We
can
got
do
a few more minutes. Do you want to do the winners and losers?
Oh, yeah, quick winners and losers.
Yeah.
Vic,
Okay, yeah. You want to go first? Or you want me to go first?
I want you to go first because I got to
Okay.
think of mine.
Okay, good. I'll give you the easy ones. I'll take the more obscure ones. Well, big losers, Barack Obama. This was his operation, and I think you could tell. I'd love to know. There's going to be some amazing tell-alls now that she's lost about what exactly happened behind the scenes. Particularly, I cannot imagine what the campaign headquarters and the operations are like between the Obama people and the Biden people. It could not have been pretty. But this was Barack Obama's operation, right? He's the man behind the scenes. All of his people, David Plouffe, Stephanie Cutter, all these people that worked for him, that were working for and trying to drive the Harris-Walz campaign. And I think he kind of knew at the end when he starts talking about Donald Trump supporting, white supremacists in Charlottesville. It would no. The answer is no. But he does that. He resorts to just flat out lies at the end because whatever it takes to win. He's a big loser in this. I'll give you a big. You will be surprised by my big winner. Do you know who my big winner is, Mary Catherine?
Who's that?
It's the Republican candidate for governor in North Carolina, Mark Robinson.
Okay,
Goodbye.
why?
Ready? Goodbye, Governor's Mansion. Hello, Nude Africa. And you just don't even have to, he doesn't have to pretend anymore. No more. You don't need any sort of fake names on the site.
Yep,
It says,
it's
hey,
true.
it's me. I'm here. And I'm going to add all the comments I want now. Just
Oh my
completely
gosh.
unleashed.
Yeah, he can
unfettered.
write just that freedom of speech is going to be very real.
Oh my goodness. No inhibitions. Okay. I have others, but you go.
Let's see. I mean, an easy one is loser, mainstream media and its narratives.
Yep.
Winner, alternative media. And it shouldn't be alternative media. The Free Press, the Free Beacon, even Joe Rogan's podcast, which is not a journalistic endeavor per se.
Mhm.
But you know what it is? It's a curious endeavor.
Yeah.
It is a place where you go and you ask or get asked
Mhm.
3 hours worth of questions. And I found JD Vance's interview with Joe Rogan so refreshing, if
Right.
only for this reason. They were just talking about issues that who's somebody who speaks in public about them, things
Mhm.
like gender issues and trans issues,
Right.
they were not dancing around them. They
No.
were not scared to speak.
Right.
They weren't playing defense like everyone's going to take everything we say out of context. They just had a discussion about it.
Yeah.
And I want people to feel freer to do that. and alternative media sources make them freer
Do
to
you
do
remember
that.
the move to try to get him off Spotify because he was talking about
Do
COVID
I
the wrong way?
remember?
Mhm.
God, we did 3 weeks of coverage on that. That was a 3-week news cycle.
Yeah.
Was to cancel Joe Rogan, take his contracts away from him, take his livelihood away from him because he said things they didn't like about COVID. That
Yeah.
was the plan. And then they're like, "Oh, let's go on Joe Rogan's show, but can we do it? I don't think we should do it. He should come to us." Yes. And
Yeah.
it's like, I think if she'd gone on the show, he probably wouldn't have endorsed. Like, if
That's
she'd gone on
interesting,
and
and
just, like,
there's a
had a nice conversation with him.
Yeah. Yeah. And there are apparently, listeners were interviewed actually on NBC, young men a guy who was saying that, yeah, he's going to vote for Trump because she didn't go on the show. I mean, so he does have a very large reach. And you saw she was supposed to be on another podcast and it didn't go over well, so it never ran.
Oh my gosh, can we talk about this?
Yeah,
Actually,
it's just the
this
bacon
is
thing.
just
Yeah,
a perfect distillation
it is.
of who
Sums it up.
she is as a candidate. So
Right.
she's supposed to do this. This is August, by the way. This was
Yeah.
late August.
Yeah.
This would have been the first interview she had given
Yeah.
if they had run this video. So imagine how bad it is that they didn't run it. Okay.
Right. And it was bad.
The show is Subway Takes. It's a Muslim creator, and apparently you're supposed to have a surprising take that you bring
Mhm.
to the show to talk about. So
Yeah.
this Muslim creator's sitting down with her, and he says to her team, like, "I want to talk about Gaza," and they're like, "I don't know if we can do that." Now he's
Yeah.
not a traditional reporter, just as Joe Rogan
Yeah,
isn't.
sure.
So people's ethics are different about how they deal with this, but he took the parameter that, like, okay, you're not going to ask about Gaza, and he accepted that, and he said to himself, well, if I feel weird about it, I'll just not run it, right?
Yeah.
So he comes to the interview. She's unwilling to talk about the thing that all Muslim, like,
Right.
viewers of this would care about.
Sure. The elephant in the room.
Then she has to deal with her surprising take. By the way, I think it's important to note that this comes via a profile of the creator. This is not political reporting. This is accidental political reporting that
Right.
happened while they were doing this. The New York Times was profiling this guy and finds out that, oh, their queen did an interview in August that was so bad, this guy couldn't run it. Well, why was it so bad? Well, what happened was a dispute over Harris's take.
Mhm.
Rama, that's the creator, said he had been told that the vice president would be taking a stand against removing one's shoes on airplanes. It's brave stuff. When they sat down, however, Harris had surprised him with a different take. Bacon is a spice. Two senior campaign officials said this topic had been raised in advance. Rama and his manager dispute this. Rama, who doesn't eat pork for religious reasons, was taken aback. I don't know, he says in an unpublished video recording of the interview, his voice rising to an unusually high pitch. Harris elaborates that bits of cooked bacon can be used to enhance a meal like any other seasoning. Think about it, it's pure flavor, she says. Rama asks Harris if he can use beef or turkey and what kinds of dishes would benefit from bacon. He then pauses the interview and tells her that he doesn't eat it. He asks if they can do the airplanes take instead. But on the advice of a staffer, Harris decides to declare her love of anchovies on pizza, an alternative the campaign had floated earlier in an email. Rama wraps the discussion 1 minute later.
It was the lamest campaign. That's it. Don't know how else to put it together.
Again, this was the first interview she sat for.
Yeah.
And this is what came of it.
Yeah.
This is
It did
beyond
not
Veep
portend well.
level.
It's beyond.
I was of the mind, and I think I've said it before on the show, that there is no president right now. We have a president by committee of whoever's running things over there. I don't think she's capable of the job.
No.
Given that's what her decision-making process looks like.
Right. And
this.
And that's what America currently has for the next several months. So, Mary Catherine, this brings up my other question.
Yeah.
How do you think Joe Biden's feeling right now?
Is he? Well, he might still be asleep.
Okay, that's true. He's having sweet dreams.
No, look,
Okay.
the incentives were set up for him. Oh, by the way, he's a winner.
Yeah, I put him under my winner category. Yeah.
He's a winner. We got off of our winners and losers because my brain doesn't work, but
That's okay.
he's a winner. I do want to say, I think like some of the identity politics is a loser here.
Yeah.
And I think that's really good news for the U.S.
Yeah, it should
I
be.
feel like there's been enough backlash lately that we felt like we were sort of turning a corner. And
Mhm.
this diverse coalition of Republican voters for Trump should be enough to just like make people realize this isn't working. Shaming people, yelling at them, condescending to them
Yeah.
is not the thing that's pushing them over the edge for you.
Right. No.
So I hope
Again,
that's
and it's one of those things where you say, is it just me? And I'm glad it's not. So
yeah. But Joe's probably going to be pretty excited because he's off into the sunset.
And
he can say he's
vindication.
the only one who beat Trump.
He's the only one. That's right. I have to imagine that he, Hunter, Dr. Jill, they're just the embodiment right now, Schadenfreude. You know,
I mean,
again, he's like, could you really have done worse?
maybe Biden will pardon
Yeah.
Trump as he leaves.
Yeah. No, I mean, this is what I think is going to be really interesting. So obviously Biden did not join Harris at her campaign, victory party at Howard last night. But I kind of am, I would be hopeful. It would leave me hopeful if come January, Trump makes his first visit to the Biden White House and they have a civil conversation and that
Yeah.
Biden does better with Trump than Trump did with Biden.
Yeah.
Right. If that could happen, that would be something because then you'd see them together and maybe we won't have, everywhere in DC and I assume in other cities, but especially DC, a lot of these stores right now as we speak have been boarded up because they're bracing for, radicals. And I don't mean Trump radicals, but
Yeah, I
rather
know. That's the thing.
the
They're
resistance.
not boarding up for the Republicans.
No.
Yeah, we'll see what
Okay.
happens. Maybe they did exhaust the resistance.
Yeah, I mean that it's going to be interesting, and again, these next 4 years are going to. There's a lot that can happen. There's a lot of craziness that's going to happen. I mean,
Yeah.
there's no denying that. Particularly once we no longer have an income tax, and they remove fluoride from the water, things will get really interesting. But now is not the time for that, right? Whoever wins, you get your victory lap.
You get your
We're not
moment.
You get your
Yeah.
moment, and then. A few episodes from now, Mary Catherine, we could talk about Josh Shapiro 2028. So.
Yeah.
But today is really this is a congratulations to everybody who worked
Yeah.
very hard on that campaign. And
Although-
you know what? It's a win. It's a win it's a win for baby dog, Mary Catherine.
Oh, huge
You're
win.
a baby dog.
Coming to DC.
Yeah, that's
I
right.
will remind my liberal friends that things change very quickly. That
Sorry.
I think it was a friend of mine who, when Obama won North Carolina in 2008, she was like, she's a liberal friend. She was like, that's it. North Carolina's ours from now until the end of time.
Right.
And I just said like a little bit of caution on that front, like that.
Exactly.
So things come back around. We have a different presidential map than we did 4 years ago, than we did 4 years ago before that.
Mhm.
Things have changed so much in my lifetime. We live to fight another day. And I
think it's very gracious of you.
well, and I think though I have reservations about Donald Trump, that the
Mhm.
institutions largely did hold last time, and the ones that didn't were frankly the ones that lost last night.
Yeah, it had to
The
go.
media.
Yeah,
like-
right. Prop 36, by the way, in California, so it's going to be harder to shoplift again. That's great.
Oh, that's good news.
Let's turn these things around. And of course, the abortion amendment in Florida, thanks to Ron DeSantis' efforts so that, that holds. So it was
Yeah.
a big night
Another-
for pro-lifers, I should say.
Can I offer another winner?
Please.
The competent, popular Republican governors of Florida, Georgia, and Virginia, whose operations have made those
Yeah.
states, along with Donald Trump, in a partnership that has sometimes been rocky,
Yeah,
especially in the case of
we
Kemp,
know about that, right?
but have made those states redder because
Yeah.
they worked together and because those guys really know what they're doing on the ground.
You know what I look forward to, by the way, is the next gubernatorial election in Georgia when it's going to be the Republican candidate is Kirk Cousins. That's what I'm looking forward to.
Versus Stacey Abrams, I'm sure. Anyway, all right.
Okay, here we go.
We should wrap it up.
There will be plenty more to discuss, but as for now, that wraps up this episode of Getting Hammered. Remember, you can subscribe to us on iTunes, Google Play, and YouTube, and you can follow me on Twitter at Victory Nomadis.
I'm at MK Hammer on Twitter, at MK Hammer Time on Instagram. You can follow the show at Getting Hammered Podcast on YouTube and Instagram. We will get into like a little more depth on the exit polls in the future, but I needed a moment to sleep and then figure that out.
same.
So thanks for getting hammered responsibly. This has been a Nebulous Media Podcast.